Today we are going to updo this neglected mirror into an aged patina vintage beauty. I'm going to start by giving my frame a good cleaning, which is important to make sure that your molds and your paint adhere well to the surface. Now I'm going to show you my casting resin. It is 2 bottles. One is labeled B and one is labeled A. And in the box you have 2 little cups, but I'm using 2 Dixie cups that I have on hand and 1 disposable cup along with a plastic knife. The box also comes with a little popsicle stick that you can use to stir. I have a few decorative molds that I use, redesigned by Prima. It has some great silicone molds, and these are thick and very beautiful. They have all sorts of styles. I am going to use a couple of the styles here and just make a collection of molds that I can use. I'm going to begin by pouring my first liquid into my Dixie cup almost to the top, about 3/4 full. Then I'm going to pour the second one. Now that I have both of them equally poured into my Dixie cups, I'm going to combine them into one larger cup. Once I pour this, I'm going to need to begin mixing quickly. 30 seconds is the amount of time that you should mix this liquid, and make sure you don't go under or over the amount. When you're pouring into your molds, be careful so that it doesn't spill. You want to just try to get it into all the details of your molds. Once you've poured your molds, wait about 15 minutes for them to harden. Now I am going to begin removing my molds, and I just wiggle the silicone material of the mold to get the hardened mold out, being very careful to not break off any pieces. You just want to go a little bit at a time with your fingers, pulling it out, making sure you can detach it. And that's it. You just get these beautiful molds out one at a time, and you will reveal all this luscious detail of the mold. I just love working with resin molds. Okay, so now I have my molds made, and I made quite a few extras so that I can see what design I want to do. So I like these big ones to maybe put symmetrically down here, and you can just decide on the pattern that you like before you glue. So here we have some bunches of flowers that maybe I can just situate up here and do some flowers on the opposite side. Maybe some leaves. You can even have something like overlapping a little bit. It doesn't matter that the resin is white. We're going to paint over it, and this is all going to be seamless once we get it all on there. It's going to look really pretty. It's going to add texture. It's going to really give it some depth. Maybe add some design down here. It doesn't have to be symmetrical. Okay, I think that looks pretty balanced. I really like that. So now comes the gluing process, and I like using Titebond wood glue. It is really, really good for this stuff. It is solid, it dries so strong. Okay, so I'm going to take my glue and put a little bit, just a little bit, in the area where I want a mold to go, and just set the mold right on top. Now you see I put too much and the glue is coming out everywhere, so I'm going to redo this. You have to just put a little bit of glue. Actually, maybe even just a dot is enough. Okay, so press down a little bit to secure it. Let's try this one. We'll do just a little dot. This glue is so amazing that you really don't need much. It'll hold. See, that's already too much again. You gotta play with the amounts until you get just enough so that it doesn't come out and squish everywhere. Okay, that's good. Let's try this big guy. Now, before I made the mistake of only gluing this part, and these ends were elevating. So you can always come back after the mold has dried and add more glue. But this is a good way to do it too, is turning it upside down and getting just little drops into all of the parts of the mold so none of it is going to stick up later. And try to remember where you had your original placement. See, that works really well. Here's a quick trick. You might want to tape down the ends when your mold is not flush against the surface so that the glue will adhere well. Take some painter's tape and simply put it on the edge on either side of your mold on one end, and do the same on the other end, or really wherever you need it to be just secured down, pushed down a little bit. And that's a good amount of pressure to just get the glue to touch the surface of the mirror so that it'll dry and tighten up. You can do the same thing also if you have a furniture piece that is standing up on the ground, you tape your molds on. Okay, I'm going to continue doing all these molds and I'll be back to show you how we start painting. So we're gonna let this dry for a couple hours and then I'll be back and we'll get started with painting. So I have given the molds plenty of dry time. It's actually the very next day because I didn't get to this piece earlier, but I'm going to show you, I'm going to pull off this tape and show you how strongly these molds adhere with this glue. See, you can't even move this thing. It is on there solid. So I'm gonna remove any extra tape, check all my molds, that they are nice and secure. And that looks good. Now, I have brought out an array of paints here. I'm going to do a paint layering technique to try to create a vintage, almost patina effect. I'm really going to try to do a patina look on this mirror. So I have red, brown, I have black, I have like an aqua color, and I will put all the names of these paints in the video description. I also have several paint brushes, and I keep always a handy large Ziploc bag because in between layers I like to protect the brushes from getting dry. So I will just throw them in here carefully when they have paint on them and just zip it up so that they don't dry up so quickly. So we are going to start with black. I figured black would be a good nice base to start working with, and this is just called Black by Behr. It's settled a little bit, so I'm mixing it up really quickly. Then I'm going to take one of my paint brushes. Actually, I love working with my Big Purdy because it will get the paint on there really quick. And I noticed that some debris, some dust has fallen overnight on this mirror, so I'm just going to take a brush and get everything off, get a nice clean surface so that the paint adheres better. So we're going to start applying our first coat. And really what I'm doing, because this mirror somebody had already painted it black, I'm just going to make everything more uniform, cover up these molds. That's why it doesn't matter what color your resin is, because we're going to paint over it anyway. And we're just getting the paint all into these nooks and crannies of the molds. And actually I am going to grab my water, my misting bottle. I do need the misting bottle to help me get into all the grooves of these molds. You just spray a little bit of it, then the paint, and that will get it into all the little details of your molds. You want to go all around. You also want to make sure that you get the black onto the frame so that everything has a good foundation. And don't put a whole lot of paint with each application. It's not necessary. You want thin coats. Later I'm going to show you how to add texture. by the way in which you apply your paint. For now, we are just getting on a base. So see how the molds start to blend in seamlessly? And when we start layering, it's going to look really cool to have kind of this elevation and this texture coming out from the florals and the little designs of the molds. It's really going to enhance the aesthetic. Already I can see it coming to life, and I really like the way the flowers look up here. This is a very easy way to really just elevate the aesthetic of any piece. So I'm going to fast forward the video, continue finishing this, and I'll be back to show you more. We are back, guys, and I waited about 40 minutes for this to dry. It depends on where you are, if you're working outside, where you live, how quickly your chalk paint will dry. I also elevated the mirror with some paint cans so that I can make sure I can get really well into the sides here. Our next color is going to be Chocolate Swirl by Behr. It's a really rich, beautiful brown. Let me see if I can show you this. See, that's a really creamy, rich, it does look like chocolate. That's why it's called Chocolate Swirl, I guess. Really pretty brown. I'm going to get a brush. This is actually a dense, small brush, which will work fine for our next layer, which is going to be brown over the black to start creating that patina effect. And I'm going to try to add texture. So I'm going to get paint on my brush, just trying to get this stir nice and clean so that I can reuse it over and over again so we don't waste tools. And I'm going to just dab this brush up and down in random parts. When you do that, this motion, dry brushing, no spray misting, no water on your surface, it's going to create these textured bumps, this textured look, just in random places, not covering up all the black. Don't forget your sides and the interior parts of your frame. But by doing this on the next few layers, by kind of hammering your brush over the surface, it's going to create just a more rustic, textured aesthetic. It's going to really give that dimension that we want in an older piece, and just continue to go in random spots with the brown. So now that our brown paint has dried, and it's very much more subtle, the brown now, it looks good. Now we're going to do some red. Now the red, I'm also going to apply it sporadically and hitting my brush. The red sometimes adds some patina effect when you combine it with teals or the aqua color or the darker colors. It's kind of like the oxidized look coming through. But again, just random, blotchy, and textured by hitting your brush up and down over the surface of your piece and also over the molds. Not entirely over the molds, just in certain parts. And be sure to not cover up all your brown just yet. We are going to cover up a lot of the undercolors, but we're going to make them all work together with the top layers. We're just creating dimension, we're creating character by adding all these undertones. I'll show you later how it all starts working together. Okay guys, so we're going to leave this like this for now, and I will be back to show you more layers. By the way, I just want to share how I store my brushes in between my layering applications. Just very carefully to not get all the paint over each other, but in this large Ziploc bag, and I just zip it up, and that keeps it from drying out. Keeps the paint from drying on the brushes too quickly while we're working on our piece. My red is almost dried. In the meantime, I am going to apply some of my gold leaf rub and buff to just add a little bit of metallic sheen to this finish. I'm just gonna rub a little bit on my finger of my glove and just go like this over certain parts, kind of around the red, where I later think I can accentuate the patina effect, and maybe some of my molds. This is an optional step. I'm going to see if I like it once I get my layers on there, but it could be that it adds some more dimension and some more of an aged effect by adding some gold. If you don't like something, you can always just come back over it with your paint, so not a big deal. I can also tap up and down over imperfections or elevations to give it more texture. You can rub side to side like that with your finger and bring out the texture of the wood underneath or of the layers of paint. Look how the gold wax brings out the details on the molds. That's pretty neat. That's pretty good use of your metallic waxes. I have these in all sorts of colors and they last me forever. I use them a lot, and I love the effects that they can achieve with paint. Okay, so now I'm going to continue with my aqua color. I'm going to shake this up really well. You can also do this to try to get the settled or separated paint to just kind of come together, or you can use a paint stirrer. Either way I think works pretty well. This is called Reflecting Pool, and I love this color. So we're going to get another one of my pretty brushes, and this color, look how pretty it is. It's just a really light aqua. And this is going to be helpful for giving that patina look. So I'm just gonna start playing with this, seeing which rhythm I like. Dabbing it up and down. Again, dry brushing. We're not using any water to move this chalk paint like we usually do with chalk paint. Dry brushing. Dabbing up and down. Look at how this is transforming already the look of this mirror, of the frame. Really, you see a lot of the colors underneath, and then you see this aqua just taking it to a whole nother level, and how it highlights the molds, how it just really brings out all the details on these little leaves just by adding a contrasting color. That's what I love about chalk paint layering, is you can achieve these effects. You can see texture, dimension, all this richness come to life. Once you get to this level of your layering, once you have several colors underneath, this is the magic that starts to happen, which I just love. I'm not going to cover up everything, but I am going to use a lot of my aqua here to make things a little more cohesive, but I'm leaving, for example, some of the undertones there of red and gold. Just a little bit of paint at a time on my brush, and you want to dry it out as you dab it up and down. You don't want a lot of wet paint on there because that won't give you the texture. It's the dry paint against the dry surface that will create this texture and this character that we want. So here I'm going to go lightly and see how much of the red I keep exposed, some of the gold. Really, it's your choice how combined or how separated you want the colors. Looking fabulous. I really like this all these colors coming through. I really like the color combinations that we picked. Really, really cool. This is my favorite part of the renovation when I do this painting technique, is when I get up to the higher levels of colors. Once I have like 3 or 4 layers of colors underneath, and seeing what starts to come together. This is really fun. Be sure to get really creative with your color combinations and have fun with this technique. This can be done on furniture, on dressers. I do it all the time. Really, really fabulous. And if you can see here, it bubbled up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just hit it again. Maybe go this way and pull some of that paint off, and it'll slightly distress it, which is another really helpful tool, distressing, for adding aged character. You can always wipe off your paint right before it's completely dry, and it should take off the top layer and expose something underneath, and that's really a good way to add aged character or a weathered look. Getting around these molds, just hitting my brush up and down, going lighter in some parts. This is more smoky, this is more vivid. I can probably soften this a little bit. And look, I'm scraping it off and it's distressing. Love it. You find something out every time you do a renovation, that if you just move your brush rough over the paint, it'll start to distress that top layer, exposing some of the darker colors underneath. Depends on how thick your paint is, I guess. And that's really pretty too, is that distressed look. I'm gonna continue here, dabbing up and down. How do you guys like this renovation so far? How do you like this look? Let me know in the comments below. I have a lot of other tutorials on YouTube and on my blog. On my blog, I go really in depth with the details. You can really read the details of my renovations. I give extra tips. And on YouTube, you can really visually see what I'm doing. So I like to always refer to both spots if you want to get a full concept of how I do these renovations. Wow, this is awesome. I'm really happy with how this is coming out. Really vintage with spectacular colors too. And now I'm rubbing it kind of over, not applying more paint, to make things a little bit more cohesive, a little bit more smoky. Now I'm applying pressure to distress. Can you see that coming through the black underneath? I'm distressing it with just the pressure of my brush. Lots of things you can do with paint and your brush, and with water too. You can do wet distressing, that's really fun too. But I'm just kind of scraping off some of the paint to distress it a little bit. And I'm going to also work around the frame here. I'm having way too much fun with this. And look how fabulous this has dried out. I love all the yummy texture, all the different layers coming through, the hints of colors underneath. This really does look pretty fabulous. I'm just going to add some final details just to finish this off. I'm gonna add a little bit more of the gold leaf rub and buff to accentuate the details, to bring out some of the details of the molds. Very, very subtly, just a little bit on my finger, rubbing it parallel over the molds in just some spots. Not overwhelming the details of the molds, just kind of a hint of gold to add a little bit more character, a little bit more age to all these details. And to also help it not look plasticky, just to add a little bit of sheen to it, a little bit of sophistication to it. I am really happy with the results of this mirror transformation. I'm curious how your renovation is coming out, or if you tried a mirror or this technique or different colors. I would love to hear. Might add a little bit of the gold on the actual frame too, maybe around the edges. Okay, and as far as sealing this, you can do a spray flat finish of a clear coat. You can manually do a flat finish. You can put wax on it, but I don't recommend wax over the molds because it's really hard to work with wax over all these details. You can also just leave it like this, because if it gets scratched, it will just distress it, and again, it will add more character. And really, this chalk paint, once it's cured, it will hold up really nicely. I don't even think I'm going to seal this. I don't think it's necessary.
Strawberry on my lips,